Hello, welcome to L3 Philosophy with Emmi. This is the show that we talk about how to L3, which is love yourself, love your relationships, and love your life through life's hardest challenges and transitions. And today I have my friend and my guest, life coach Karen Owen, who helps people to rediscover their purpose, passions, and most importantly, their joy. So, Karen, thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here with you, Emmy. I'm actually turning red. I'm so excited. And I'm so excited for you to be doing this. So thank you for asking me to participate.
Absolutely. So, Karen, one of the things that we have had many discussions about in our meetings together, by the way, we have accountability meetings together. So, for people listening, if you've got a friend or a professional that you can have accountability meetings with, it really, really helps with your growth and transformation. So, Karen and I do this together. And one thing that always comes up is the change cycle. And so, if you've never heard of this, Karen is going to bring us through what the phases of the change cycle looks like and how you can apply this in your everyday life or whatever it is that you're going through. So, Karen, I know that you studied with Martha Beck, who is
Yep.
a kind of famous life coach at this point. I think she's pretty much known for being Oprah's life coach for a little while, right?
I think you're right. Yeah,
Yeah, and you trained with her, and so you're going to be sharing kind of her version of the change cycle. Is that correct?
that's right.
All
And through
right.
a conversation with you. So we'll
Yeah,
have some real life examples as we go through this.
perfect. So, where should we start?
Well, I think the most important thing, or the first place to start in, is just identifying what is the change cycle. I mean, I think whether we like it or not, change is happening all the time. I have at the top of my LinkedIn profile, change is good, because we are constantly changing. But you think about it, we're changing from babies to children, from teens to adults, through marriages and parenting and divorce and all that. There are massive changes that happen to us. But what we don't learn as a society very well, I think, is how to deal with it, right? It comes unexpected. And it's like, well, if we had expected it, it might not be as traumatic as it is. So the good news is change can be and often is for the better.
Hmm.
Many times we're being pushed to go from where we are because it's not working to something better. Even though we're real comfortable with where we are, we don't want to change it, but it's often for the better.
Yeah.
Martha
Can I,
Beck,
can I
yeah,
No, no, I just wanted to interject that last thing there. I learned that pain is actually 10 times more motivating than positive things in your life. So when you're talking about change, a lot of times we have to have really uncomfortable things happen to be motivating enough to want us to do something that might feel uncomfortable or
right,
outside of our comfort zone in order to create a new reality that is actually better for us. And
right,
so
exactly.
I'm a breakup and relationship coach. So working with people going through divorces, breakups, toxic relationships, those are maybe the hardest thing you might ever experience in your life. But they can be kind of the inflection point to completely do like a 180 and see things differently and really use it as an opportunity for growth.
Yeah. And the way that Martha Beck describes it is through the analogy, if you will, of the caterpillar to the butterfly. So what happens is the caterpillar already has the butterfly's DNA, right? And that's just like our DNA really doesn't change, but our situation does, and we help create that. But the caterpillar goes into, it's just going around, gets full, eats a lot, turns into this cocoon, right? And before it becomes a butterfly, it turns into complete goop. So this is how I'm going to describe some of these stages too, because that's what Martha does. So there's the goop, right, in this cocoon. If you actually opened it up, you would see goop, not a butterfly.
That's
You
crazy.
can't, and the idea there is you can't rush the process, right? So you've got to let nature take its turn and let that goop turn into a butterfly. So then as the butterfly breaks out of the cocoon, dries off its wings, and flies away. It's no longer earthbound, right? The way that the caterpillar does. That's what we hope this change cycle is able to, I don't know, put in our own heads. It's like you just said, the positivity of change and how it is for the better often.
Yeah.
oftentimes.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing for people listening to reflect on right now. I know I have reflected on it numerous times, which is just even the simple question of like, what is your relationship to change? As you're saying, we can frame it as something positive, or we can frame it as something scary and something to be afraid of, and, almost like a doom and gloom type of scenario.
Right.
Um, yeah.
So, and that's why this concept that Martha Beck put together for us. She actually first published it in her book, Following Your Own North Star. It was one of the first books I read before I went through her training. But what she calls it, appropriately so, I think, is change is a process. So the way that you just described it, doom or gloom, or it's like an end game, but it's not. It's a process and it's a cycle.
Mhm.
And it's a spiral cycle because what happens is we have change in one area of our life and it may or may not change other parts of our life, right? But we keep spiraling in the change cycle. So don't think of it as flat, think of it as ongoing, right? And I think if we all reflect on how we've spent our lives, we can see that change process happening over and over again in different parts of it, right?
Yes. And I'm glad that you just said it happens over and over again, because I think we can also tend to think of like, okay, I just had this like major life event. I got through it. Like, I'm good. And like, no, that's not. You're probably going to now go into a new change cycle for something else
Yes.
in your life. And so it's like you're repeatedly entering these cycles of change throughout your whole life and in different areas of your life, which is kind of where, the L3 comes in and why I wanted
Exactly.
to have our conversation. You just said that sometimes having changes in one area of your life can or may not impact another area, but oftentimes they are tightly interconnected.
Oftentimes they are. So if you'd like, I can go ahead and start and describe the four different or phases or squares of the change cycle.
Yeah, that would be
Ready for
perfect.
that? Okay, so there are four phases or four squares, and you'll hear me, interchange those words. But the first square, and if you think about it in a quadrant, it's the upper left-hand part of the quadrant, is square one, and this is called the meltdown. So if you remember, I described the goo. This is when the caterpillar has created a cocoon in your goo. This is where personally you're grieving whatever happened to you. You're grieving your old identity if you're changing identities. And if you remember what I described earlier, going from a teen to an adult, going from being single to married, going from being not a parent to a parent, your identity shifts, right? It changes. And it sometimes the old is done, but we're not ready to let go of it. So that's when we're in that goop. Yeah, that's hitting you. What came
Oh,
up?
super, super. I mean, just thinking through the lens of breakups and divorces, it's like you are oftentimes, I mean, I think that image of goo is perfect because sometimes you become goo on the couch, just like, because you become really depressed or you become hopeless or feeling really alone and like unmotivated. And I mean, that sounds goopy to me. But it's like overwhelming. It's like this kind of despair or overwhelm with like, where do I go now? What do I do now?
That's exactly right. You just hit it. Thank you. So when something like this has rocked your world, let's say you lose a job, you discover an infidelity, whatever, right? Something has locked you up, big, just knocked you down really. That again is, like I said, this is the meltdown. This is the time to dissolve. Like you just said, it's a time to wrap yourself in a blanket. It's a time to drink a cup of tea. It's a time to take care of yourself, right? Love yourself, forgive yourself for whatever may have happened, right? So things that we do when we've fallen into this, when we're losing our old identity, we're not even creating a new one yet. We're just like suffering this pain. You use the word pain. We have to live each day minute by minute. We are not planning the future yet. We've got to grieve, right? We got to cocoon and take care of ourselves. Like I said, wrap ourselves in a blanket. Sometimes it's really helpful to talk to others. Therapy is really good here. A really good friend, a relative, a life coach, talk to somebody just to talk it out. But most importantly, it's giving yourself the time and the space to grieve,
Mm.
to say, okay, this is where I am right now. It's called acceptance. We have to go through those 5 phases of grief, right? And the first one I think is denial. Let me see, I wrote them down. Anger, sadness, and acceptance.
Mm.
Did I miss one? No, I
No,
did.
that was
But
4.
anyway,
That's okay. We're a lot of us are familiar with those.
but here's the thing about that cycle is you'll go through it a few times, and you
Mhm.
won't always go from denial to anger, or from sadness to anger. It's going to be different things, but it will take time to grieve and to let it go. So the most important thing to remember about this phase when you've been knocked down is you just got to take slow and small steps. This is not a time to make big changes. Too often people try to do that, make really big changes. Like one that fits into your line of coaching would be, what's it called? Rebound romance.
Yes. I was thinking the
Yeah.
same exact thing.
Yeah, that's a red flag. That's like, no, 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 no. You don't even know who you are yet, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. You haven't had a chance to like reassess and recalibrate and kind of get more internally balanced because you're probably really knocked off your balance internally at that point. And so now you find another person and it's like, well, you haven't come back to that like centered position yet. And
exactly.
I used to tell people, I still kind of talk about it sometimes, but I call that pause the breakup recovery period. And it's just
Yeah.
that time where you are taking to heal, but also self-discovery and come back to that center. I call it reconnect, in the red process of restore. So
Phase 2.
yes.
That's where we're going. That's reformation, right? That's reforming. And so what's really interesting in this stage, okay, you're moving out of grief and you're coming into who am I,
Oh,
right?
okay.
What am I? Who am I? And so what happens in this stage and what you need to be aware of is little things are going to come into your vision or into your mind that are going to be signs of what's to come, right? And it'll help you reorganize into a new identity, if you will. It's also called the dreaming and scheming phase. So in becoming this new person, you'll start seeing different things. These are not forced things. It's not like I want to find a new beau, so I'm going to go on, some app and try to find somebody. It's not that at all. It's being passive versus really active, if I can say that. And it's mostly in the mind. You may or may not change your hairstyle. You might try on some new clothes. You might decide that your house, your living space needs to look a little different. So you're making little changes still, um, but also some big ones. Some of the things you can do, what's recommended, is maybe create a vision board of these things that you've been seeing and about, what looks good to you, what might you want to bring into your new world. It's really important to allow yourself to dream in this stage, right? I can tell you from my own experience, when I was going through a divorce, one of the things I would dream about, and in this phase, it's daydreaming. So what that means is you're actually dreaming while conscious versus asleep, because that's a whole different type of dreaming. But dreaming consciously. And what I would do is I would dream about what is the type of partner I want. Not, I didn't think so much about who I wanted to be, but I think that was also a part of it. But consciously, what do I really want now that I've experienced that relationship? What do I want in my next one? So it's dreaming. And as it unfolds, we start to do some planning, some scheming, right? We might write both of them down and we'll look for information about how to create this new reality for us, right? So this phase is all about images and imagining. We're not making any steps yet. We're dreaming and scheming. So
Hmm.
you can imagine the next step is a lot more. But
Okay.
for you and what you're doing with the, your coaches and your coaching and your clients, you just talked about it. You said it's a reformation, right? Or was that the word you used?
Reconnecting with yourself. And
That's it.
yeah, and all these words that you're saying are definitely kind of connecting with me in that regard is that it sounds like you're in this more like observational phase of just being aware and noticing, okay, what is it that I'm feeling drawn to? That maybe, am I being drawn towards things that are familiar, that are like what I've already experienced? Or am I feeling drawn to try new things or meet different people and just kind of like following the breadcrumb trail, right?
Right.
Because, repeating all of your same patterns isn't going to create anything different for you.
Yes, exactly. But this is also fun because you get to try on different things. Like I said, you can try a new hairstyle. Your hair grows back, right? For me, I would new type of glasses. It could be, like I said, new clothes or whatever. But it's an experiential phase, right? You're just going to experience a little bit. I'm sorry, not experience. What's the word?
Like experimental, kind of.
Thank you. Experimental, right? So you're going to experiment a little bit, right? Phase three, though, is when you are making your dreams come true, right? And Martha calls this the hero saga,
Mm,
because this is when we're making big, big, bold steps. We're getting, as you said, out of our comfort zone and doing things we thought we might never do before. For example, let's say that you've decided that you're going to pursue in your dreaming and scheming phase, you decided I'm going to be an artist. I've always been an artist. I'm going to start selling my art. Well, in phase three, you start approaching galleries about carrying your work, right? So you just take really steps that you've never done before, but in order to pursue your dreams, you're going to have to do it. The reason why it's called the hero saga is because this is the phase where we try and fail, try and fail, try and fail.
mm,
If you think about all the heroes in all of the stories that we've read about or heard about or seen movies about, they have challenge after challenge after challenge, right? Something else hits them. I don't know. It's a big wave on their ship or another big monster or whatever. They face that challenge and get through it. Oftentimes, first they kind of fail and then they figure out how to do it, right? That's what this phase is all about. So what we need to do when we're in phase three, and this is, I can tell you, I'm in phase three in my coaching business, right? I'm trying and failing a whole lot of different things. And I know I'm going to get to four. But anyway, okay, so what we do here is we're just going to know that things are going to fail.
mhm.
That is a lot easier to I think accept, especially when you do feel, oh, this is supposed to happen, right? So it's not going to knock us off our game. Got to try something different, learn and grow, right? So what we want to do is we want to expect things to go wonky.
Mm,
Just
mhm,
expect it. It's going to happen, right? No big deal. Be okay with starting over. Let's say that you are the artist and you do go, your first gallery says no.
mhm,
Well, you may go back home and crawl up in the bed for a bit, but maybe not. Maybe you're like, okay, let me try another gallery, right? So there's a few ways you can go about recovering from that failure.
mhm.
Um, and like I said, it's okay to go back to phase two and say, okay, I was dreaming and scheming about this, but maybe I want to do something different. But the most important thing to remember through this phase is persistence.
Mm.
Just keep at it. Don't give up. Don't give up. Keep going because the chances are you are going to be successful. You will reach that, but you're going to have some setbacks.
Right. So it sounds like you're not at this point in the game, you're not exactly sure how long your tunnel is, but you know that there is a light. You might not be able to see it, but it is there if you
Right.
keep on moving through. I mean, if you're thinking about a tunnel and you're driving and driving and driving and you're like, I'm never going to get out of this. It doesn't make sense that you would just like pull over and stop in the middle of the tunnel.
No, exactly right.
Right? It's like of course you'll never get out of the dark tunnel because you're pulling over and you're stopping. So
Right.
you have to persist in order to make it through the tunnel and be able to see the light, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think in this phase, hope is important, right?
Mm.
Trust is important, but also accepting reality is just as important. I am in the middle of the tunnel. That's where I am. I'm at the end of the
Yes.
tunnel. I will get through it. That's that hope piece, right?
Well, I think that like uncertainty, like you just kind of mentioned, is playing a big role here in potentially feeding into people's fears and insecurities. I know it certainly was for me and still continues to be as I, come upon different challenges and, changes that I want to try in my life. And so, when you're in the dark tunnel, all the fears of like, "Oh my god, like, will I ever make it out of this tunnel? I can't see, like, how am I supposed to find my way? There's no light in here. I'm just kind of, like, flailing around." And so, yeah, hope is important, but, like, how do we make sure that we don't let those fears and insecurities and all that stuff that might prevent us from actually stopping us from finally getting into the 4th quadrant, because I hear
Yeah,
this a lot. I hear a lot of people say that if you and you're probably gonna say this, so I don't wanna take the words out of your mouth, but if you don't make it into that 4th quadrant for whatever it is that you're going through in your life, you're bound to just kick yourself right back to start
right,
instead of actually completing the cycle, right?
right. And that's okay.
But
That's
it's
the
making it
point.
a lot longer than it might need to be, right?
It might, but what you might find when let's go back to your analogy of the dark tunnel. When you're in the middle of the dark tunnel and you're feeling fearful or you just don't think you can make it, there is nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this one isn't working for me. This dream, this scheme, just not working. I'm going to go back maybe to two, maybe not all the way to one, but I'm
Mhm.
going to go back to two. I'm going to go back to that dreaming and scheming because I had some other things I was thinking about, right?
Okay.
So you'll go back because you've created this little vision board thing. You probably have all kinds of stuff on it. I mean, for mine right now, I've got pictures of islands as well as big cities, so hopefully we have a variety of things we're thinking about. You can go back. So the point is, you're never stuck.
Ooh, I like that. Tell us
You're
why.
never, unless you think so, but you're not stuck. You
Okay.
can, there is honor in saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go back. And it's not really back. I'm going to two again because I want to fine tune it, figure out what's not happening here, right? So you give yourself space to go, let me figure it out. Again,
Okay.
this is a process. I can figure it out. I think the most important thing about getting out of that middle of the tunnel is confidence in yourself that you can do it. You've done it, you've gotten this far, right? You
Mm.
know how to do it. So give yourself some grace.
Okay.
And the option of being stuck is just not an option. No, you're not. I mean, you can say that to yourself, but it's not helpful.
Right, right. And what you're saying is that if we go back to phase 2, we are not necessarily failing big time. We might just be redirecting. We might be pivoting. We might be trying a slightly different perspective of even the same dream, but just maybe done in a different way.
Yeah, and what I would say, Emmy, is the idea of failure doesn't apply here.
Mm.
So when you are in three and you're in this hero saga and you're trying and trying and trying, it's not failure. That just didn't work. I have to try something different.
Mhm.
It's like the idea, I think, oh, who was it? Tried 100. Oh, was it Edison? It took him a
Oh,
hundred times to figure it right. So it's
a
just
light
not
bulb, yeah.
persistence, trying something, not the same thing every time, because we know that is the idea of failure, doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting different results,
Right.
right? So this is when you put your head around the idea that this is a process. This is something that's, like I said, wonky. It's going to be try, I don't want to say fail, but try, not succeed, try, succeed, whatever, right? So this is a phase that you've got to give yourself a lot of grace,
Mm.
but also enjoy it, right? Because this is exciting. It's fun. You're growing, you're learning new things, you're doing different things, you're meeting new people, hopefully. So it's again, mindset, process, persistence.
Okay. The 2
So
P's for section 3.
persistent. Yeah, I mean, just keep going, keep learning, keep growing. That's what you have to understand, and that tweaking your plan is expected.
Okay.
That's expected. So it's not unusual. It's expected. Just like change is expected. It's not unusual. Nobody gets through this life without change.
True.
So then once you've gotten in the groove and you are through that tunnel and you're in the light and your plan is humming, what do? That's stage 4, and that's called full flight.
Hmm.
And this is when you're fully formed into your new self, right? You're fully formed, you're flying, your new identity, you're now a butterfly, no longer a caterpillar. You don't even think about it. It's called the promised land, right? So when we're in this stage, what do? We enjoy it.
Fly, we soar.
We soar. We enjoy it. We're like, that last phase was pretty scary, but now here are the fruits of my labor, right? I'm going to enjoy it. And in this phase, you don't make any major changes the way you did in 2 and 3, those 2 squares, but in 4, you make small changes, kind of like what you do in 1. And so as you're soaring, things are going well, you're just going to make little changes on your dials instead of creating new dials, right? Like you did in 3. The most important thing to take away from 4 is change is coming.
Oh no, we're starting again.
Expect it, right? It's coming. Expect it. It's going to happen
Oh
again,
wow.
and that's okay. Be prepared for it, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things you can do is in this respect, let's say, back to that artist in the art gallery. They've sold a ton of art, things are going well, but they no longer enjoy doing the art they were doing. They want to shift to, instead of oils, they want to shift to watercolors. So they're starting new again. And
Mm,
their galleries might say, yeah, we're not going to carry watercolors. No, don't think so. They're starting over, but they're creating a new identity because something inside said it's time to change.
mm-hmm.
That can happen to all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So throughout our lives, so it kind of sounds, it's just like this natural process of, human beings in general, I think, become less, I would say, like energized about life once things become kind of like deadpan for them. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that once you've kind of experienced quadrant 4 and things are, going really well for you, like it's kind of inevitable that over time your soul is going to have this like calling for some kind of change.
Oh, absolutely.
Because humans, like, we get bored with if we're not growing and changing, we get bored. And so we're going to naturally want to gravitate towards something new or something different, which
Well, that's
starts the cycle over again, right?
right. So it might be boredom, but it's also, as we progress in our own ages, it's like you can't be a teen forever,
Right.
right? You're not going to be a parent of a young child forever.
Hmm.
You will eventually move, hopefully, into something like grandparenthood,
Hmm.
whether or not you wanted it, right? So there's these things that are going to happen because time marches on and we change as time marches. So oftentimes it's not even what we're being pulled towards. It's more about just being on this planet as a human being. Change is
Hmm.
happening.
Right. So it could be, yeah, so it could be a combination of just the phases of your life as a human,
Yes.
age-wise or, typically what we would experience, in the different phases of our life and growth and development. Um, but then also the experiences that might shape, the ways in which we change. Like for example, the end of a relationship might
Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
trigger some new desire in you or a new way of being, or just even through your growth in that experience, your priorities might shift or change,
Right.
which again will lead you to new and different things.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you share this or if you even agree with this, but I think everybody comes into our lives to teach us something. And oftentimes these relationships that go south, it's kind of like, okay, I got what the universe wanted me to get out of that one. Time to move on. Right. It's so much easier said than done. But yeah, when you say shifting priorities, it's
Yeah.
like you learned that's what I don't want. Right.
Yeah, or even the things that you value. Because I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience, and I've noticed in some of the people I work with too, it's like maybe in one relationship that you were in, you really, really valued spending like a ton of time with that person. But maybe now in your life, you're like, actually, I want more me time and not spending as much time with this person, but maybe connecting in, different ways. So you could experience different like outcomes based on what you've been through, but also
Yeah.
how your values have shifted over time
Right.
or through experience. But one thing I wanted to also kind of bring up with you is the value just in itself of knowing the steps of the change cycle. Because, using breakups and divorce as an example, you feel like you're going to be stuck in phase one forever while you're in it. I know that as, a newer entrepreneur and business owner, I feel like I'm going to be stuck in phase three forever. So that was one thing that actually really helped me when we had a discussion about the change cycle one day was knowing, as you shared with us earlier on in this conversation, that if you keep, persisting, that you will make it into the next quadrant, which
Right.
feels nice to know that.
It does, doesn't it? And it gives you permission to try different things, like try and fail, try and fail. It just gives you, I don't know, I guess a belief system that, yeah, this too shall pass and I will survive and or thrive. And I think we have so many experiences in our lives that prove to us when we look back, we got this. We've
Hmm.
been playing this game of life for a while. We got this. We'll
Hmm.
get through it. But we have that, and it's that internal negative voice that's like, you're not gonna be able to do that.
Right.
That's another conversation. But right, so we have too much internal talk oftentimes that tries to keep us safe, but all it really does is keeps us from being who we really are.
True. And I don't know if it's because I'm more of a type A person, but having that kind of four quadrant structure, I also
Ah,
really like being able to identify where I am in the cycle. It's almost like helpful. It's because it's like, oh, okay, like I'm in the dreaming and scheming phase. Like I don't have to push myself into hardcore action so much right now. I'm birthing something new, and this is my time to just kind of sit back and let all the ideas flow and be creative and, surround myself in the environment, the images, the words that I'm trying to create.
right, right.
Then phase three, where I'm like, okay, you know what? I did the dreaming and scheming. I have the vision board up on my wall. Like now I need to actually, take action and get things done.
Right. And the way I would reframe that, instead of saying I need to take action, I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
I'm
When you
ready to
are,
take,
I
yeah,
guess. I mean, guess I sometimes it takes like a little push, from yourself or maybe a friend
or an accountability partner.
or a coach or accountability partner. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I have found myself now kind of in the different things I'm facing. I'm like, oh, I wonder what phase I'm in right now, just because it helps to know the characteristics and what to expect.
And how to take care of yourself during those phases, right?
Exactly.
How to get through these phases with the least amount of angst. And I can tell you, I wish I did not know this when I was going through my divorce many years ago. I wish I had, because the pain that the suffering
Mhm.
that I felt through all of the different parts that you go through when you're getting a divorce, and the fear of becoming a bag lady, and just all those fears. I know, I mean, they're real though. It's like, had I known this process, I think I would have had less suffering. I think it would have been a lot more self-assured about getting through the process.
Mhm.
Maybe not. I don't know, but I think it would have been helpful. And I think that that's one of the reasons why you gravitated to the change cycle idea, is because it's just one of those things that's now we have, a process, a structure, and a roadmap
Mm-hmm.
shows us this is where we're going.
Right.
And that in the promised land is just that, right? It's a good place. So keep going.
Right. Keep
It's
going.
not the end.
Absolutely. And, something that you were saying about if you had known what the process looked like, um, I mean, I guess this isn't really that important to the conversation, but, for people who are maybe curious, like you did find another relationship. Just I like it because not that that's like the end all be all of, of happiness or anything, but,
Sure.
you were saying that in one of the phases you had all these thoughts that weren't helpful, like I'm never going to find anyone again, I'm going to be a bag lady, or, you could share whatever some of those thoughts might have been for you. Um, but because you persisted, you were able to kind of make it into quadrant 4 and find love again. And then, it brought you into a new phase of your life.
Yep. And honestly, I will say this, every relationship, as we change, so do relationships, right?
Mhm.
What has been really beautiful through this process of understanding the change cycle and understanding, quite a bit of what I've learned as being a life coach is that relationships are a dance, right? But and my husband and I are my second and last husband and I, we are, we do that dance, but we figured out how to be something I couldn't do my first one for whatever reasons, vulnerable, accepting, obviously loving, respectful, all of the things we have to be in a relationship. But it doesn't mean that it's easy street, right?
Mhm.
Anything worth having is going to have some difficulty, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Challenge, sacrifice. What kind of effort are you willing to put in order to get a specific outcome,
Yeah.
or at least an idea of an outcome?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And I think that I have learned, I've also become a lot more brave about talking about what my needs are, or becoming more vulnerable. I
Mm,
remember when I was going through my divorce, and in therapy we talked a lot about vulnerability, because that's like, no, I'm good.
mhm. Yeah.
That was one of my learning. That's one of the things I had to learn, was that vulnerability is a strength.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And what phase of the cycle do you think you were in when you were doing all of those kind of discoveries?
I
Like
would
chapter 3
say that
or
that would have been square two.
square 2? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So like learning more about yourself, maybe where your blind spots are, maybe where you're bringing awareness. That's a phase
Yep.
thing.
Yep. Yep. So not only was I learning about or figuring out, dreaming about what I wanted in my life, I was also dreaming about, who do I want to be? What is this identity I want now? I don't want to be that stoic, strong person where nothing bothers me and I can't share it, right? I
Mm.
didn't want to be that person anymore, because it wasn't who I was, honestly. I had a little bit of a imposter syndrome in that respect, right?
Mm.
The imposter being someone that's never hurt
Yeah.
or
So
invincible.
that sounds actually really important that we kind of added this to our dialogue of like not only the vision board of like maybe the stuff you want to do or the things you want to achieve, but where do you want to shift as far as who you are becoming, or what
Right,
does that like higher version of yourself look like?
right.
Um, so Karen, I'm curious, okay, thinking about, the change cycle as a whole and the different components of what I call my L3 philosophy. What do you think are the biggest things that might prevent people from L3, loving themselves, loving their relationships, loving their life, maybe as it relates to the change cycle or change in general? And I know I'm like throwing this question at you like
No, I would
on the
say, I mean,
spot.
we've bounced around and talked about this idea a little bit. It's in that idea of expectations. I
Mhm.
think that when we have an expectation that change is not going to happen,
Mm,
that's when we get blindsided. I
yeah.
think when we have the expectation that, of course, things are going to change,
Mm,
and what role do I have in controlling that change? Because oftentimes we have none, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't control what my partner does,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have no control over that. What I do have control over is what I want to think about it, how I want to behave around it, who I want to be
Mm-hmm.
towards it, right? So what we have to do is understand what those expectations are and just, put them into perspective. And
I
just like we
love
said earlier. Oh,
I love that you brought that up because it immediately makes me think about when two people enter a relationship, let's say in the beginning, right? When you're dating, you have the butterflies for each other,
so
maybe,
fun. Yeah,
or maybe you've just gotten engaged or getting married. Um, I think there is an expectation that nothing is going to change, that you both are going to remain cemented, as this like momentum you could put on your pedestal like for the rest of eternity, which
right.
is setting you up for extreme failure because both people in the relationship are changing throughout each of their own individual cycles, which means the dynamic of a relationship is going to change too. And so that sounds actually really expansive to assume the mindset when you're starting a relationship or committing to someone long term.
Right.
I expect change versus I expect nothing to change.
Right. This is going to stay this way all the time.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that's like, through movies and, whatever we've grown up with as far as fairy tales are concerned, that's kind of what we've been fed about relationships.
Oh,
It's like, oh,
absolutely.
you're going to find this
Happily ever after.
exactly, and you're going to find this character and nothing's ever going to change. That's it. Like you notice that's where movies end. It's like they meet each other, they fall in love, and then like boom, the movie's over. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that's it.
Nobody's washing the dishes, changing the diapers, or, going to the grocery store. No, not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, and so I think that's really powerful if people were to enter commitments, long-term commitments with the mindset of I expect things to absolutely change and how are we going to manage them together? How will I manage them as an individual?
And I gotta tell you, having this conversation takes me back to the marriage counseling that we had through our church, my first husband and I, to figure out, this thing called marriage. And I just remember the priest saying, he asked us to both draw our ideal Christmas trees, odd as that sounds, and they were vastly different, right? So the message from the priest was you're going to have to create your own. What I wish he had said is not only do you have to create your own, but you're going to have to do that through your whole life. You're going to have to make, like you said earlier, sacrifices and decisions that you want to make because you are committed to each other versus to whatever those other things are. So I feel like that's what was missing in that. I loved the session with the priest. Don't get me wrong, that was a really good way of looking at things, but it like the fairy tales fell short of
Mm,
about what we were really entering into.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%.
I don't think we don't get, I don't know. Where do you go to marriage school? Where
I don't
do you
know.
go to relationship school? Where do you go?
I
Right?
don't know.
How do you learn how to have a relationship that's committed if that's what you really want? Because not everybody wants that, right?
Right. Right, absolutely. All right, Karen. So to kind of sum up our conversation, just to make it like kind of nice, crystal clear the boxes again. So we've got our four stages. We've
Yep.
got phase one,
The
chrysalis,
meltdown.
gobbledygook. Um, and it's so fascinating that it actually like disintegrates into a totally different form.
That's
Um,
what we do. We melt down.
yeah, and that's how what it feels like if you can feel like you're just completely not yourself and
Right.
for a while, right?
And rather than fight it, nurture it, take
Right.
care of it, right?
Give yourself some compassion.
Very much.
Like I'm
Yes.
going through this thing. This is totally normal. I'm not a
Right.
psycho. I'm not, all the
Exactly.
things.
This is normal. Exactly.
Okay. And then phase two, now we're moving into dreaming and scheming. We're noticing like what we're either gravitating toward or what things are coming into our life, what people we're meeting.
Yep.
Anything else here? Creating a vision.
Yeah, creating a vision and just being open to new ideas
Mhm.
and playing with them in a way, like I said, in daydreaming, playing with new ideas to see how they feel. So
Mm,
if they feel good, go towards them. If they feel put them aside, right? So
that's
really
great
get into your
advice.
body in this stage and what feels good.
That's
Like I
great
said,
advice.
you might get a new haircut, you might change the way that you dress, you might change your living space.
Yeah,
This is where you're dreaming and scheming. You might be trying some new things, but this is not um, trying new things to create your future. Like this is not so much the hero saga part of it,
right,
but it's playing around with ideas.
right. Being open to potential.
Yep, yep, yep.
Okay, and
And
so then
following,
we
going
move
down
to
the
stage
paths that feel
three,
good. Yeah. Okay.
which is the hero's saga. Try, fail, keep going. The two
Keep
P's,
going.
persevere and what's the other P?
Persist.
Persist. Okay.
Just keep at it. Just keep at it. Expect things to not work out the way that you were hoping they would. So that you and take it like we should for all things where we don't get our A grades is this is an opportunity to learn and grow. What can I learn here? How can I change? How can I grow to make this different and better? So
Right.
it's not, so the most important part in the hero saga, I think, is not beating yourself up when things go wrong,
Hmm.
but to know that they're going to, and
Right.
that's okay.
Right. And I think an important piece is like when you say expect things to go wrong, it's not that we're being a pessimist. It's that
Mm-mm,
we're just actually seeing things going wrong as a good thing because they are helping to direct us and teach us to where we're trying to get.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I like that word direct. Yep.
Okay. And then once we persist through, we make it through the tunnel, we enter phase four, which is there like an actual name? It's like flying and
It's
soaring.
called the promised land.
The promised land. Ooh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's where we just get to really enjoy the fruits of our labor, right?
That's where we enjoy the fruits of our labor. That's where we make little steps. So in phases and steps, I mean, in squares 2 and 3, we're making big changes, big
Mm.
steps. In 1, where we're melting down, and in 4, where we're flying, we're just making little tweaks. We're not
Okay.
doing anything major, right? We're just soaring along, doing our thing, while knowing change is coming.
Okay. Okay. Yes, because we're
Change is
going to
coming.
start back again in phase one for something else.
Yes, exactly. Something is going to change and I know it. And I know it because if I had a, rational look at my life, I had to graduate from elementary school to go to middle school, which led me to high school. That's just our life as we progress. There's a new school.
Right.
There's a
Yeah.
new
For
school.
everything.
Yeah.
And so I know we've given a bunch of examples already of like where we might see the change cycle show up. That's a mouthful. We talked about relationships, the ending of relationships. We talked about new jobs or new careers. We talked about, you know, um, raising children to becoming an empty nester, maybe even embarking on a creative journey, like becoming an artist and wanting to put your things in a gallery. Are there any other kind of, because I know your specialty is helping people with life transitions, kind
Right.
of from one phase to the next. So is there anything else that we didn't touch on that might be considered like a phase of one's life or a life transition?
I
That
would say one thing that we didn't touch on that's very important to remember is that oftentimes with these life changes that we're going through and through these stages, people are going to come and go, right? We're going to have friends for different seasons.
Mhm.
They're not going to stay with us forever. Some may, right? Some, your middle school buddy is always going to be your buddy, but you're going to have different people come in and then different people leave, and that's okay.
Wow, yeah. That was a huge, I think, learning piece for me in my life. And when you can really appreciate people for when they are in your life, I think it's like natural for people to kind of take it very personally when someone's like slowly making their way out of your life or not keeping touch as often. You're like, what did I do or what happened? But like sometimes it's just like the natural progression of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah, you grow apart. Your
Yeah.
interests change. You are changing as your identity changes. So your friendships, your relationships with others, not just the primary relationship, but with others, it will change. And again, that's expected, right? And be okay with it.
Mhm.
And also understand it's okay to grieve some of those losses, right? When that friend leaves your orbit, and you miss them, you can communicate with them, or you can decide that's probably not going to work, but still grieve, go
Mhm.
through that grieving process, and then move on. So you have the, that's one of the tools is understanding that I'm grieving about this loss, but it won't last forever. Give
Right.
myself some time to do that, then let go.
Awesome. Well, Karen, is there anything that you want to leave people with? I do love, your statement of how you help people, which is rediscovering your purpose, your passions, and most importantly, your joy. And as I
Yeah.
said, it really aligns with L3, love yourself, love your relationships, love your life. What's your specific recipe for, I don't know if we want to say achieving these things, but for like cultivating these things in your life?
So what I believe is, and that's why I use that word joy when I talk about how I help people. I really believe that when we find as human beings our joy, and it doesn't need to be anything massive. I think joy is found in a leaf that's shaped like a heart on your walk. Joy is wherever you find it. It's not so much happiness as it is a sense of awe or a sense of, well, oh, isn't this amazing? Um, that when you have that fulfillment, when you're filled with joy, other things come,
Mm,
right? It just, I think it multiplies.
mhm,
And so I would say that that's my main focus with folks is find places where you can find joy, because that's what you're on the planet to do. You're not on the planet to suffer.
mhm. Awesome. Well, Karen, thank you very much for all of your insights and wisdom today. And how would people like to, if they want to connect with you, how would they reach out to you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It has been such a pleasure as always. We love talking to each other. The way people can reach me is through my website, KarenPriceOwenLifeCoach.com, or through my email, which is just a Gmail, KarenPriceOwen@gmail.com. So that's very easy ways to reach me. You can Google me and find me also. I have a Google My Business page. So yeah, just contact me. Give me a call. I love talking to people.
Oh, there's a new concept these days to talk to someone on the phone. That's like actually very rare. So
But
yeah,
it's so beautiful, right?
absolutely. I would love if someone just called and wanted to, chat with me as well. But that's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that. And
Sure.
we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, Emmy.
Take care.